Okay, we are live then. Excellent. Well, mostly live. Um, okay, everybody. Hi, welcome. Welcome to Discussing Tabletop. It is, of course, I, your normal host, Tantus Naravan Dracovin, and with me is my normal guest, Joe. Apologies, we don't have anybody else this week. Sicknesses and other problems have caused not a lot of extra people for this week, and there probably won't be a lot with Christmas coming up next week. We might still have a show on the 24th, Christmas Eve, depending on how we both feel, and if we're both busy or not. At least we'll have a show, okay? So if anyone wants to join us Christmas Eve, go ahead, otherwise, we understand if you don't want to be there. All right, so why don't we get to the docket this week, and then I'll go over a little bit of information about what's going on with the channel and such, and then we'll get into the topics. How's that sound, everybody?
Sounds good.
Great. So the topics this week are, first, I do want to talk about Magic the Gathering a little bit. Now, there wasn't any major news, but Aether Revolt is coming out soon, the next set in the Kaladesh block. So I wanted to talk about the mechanics of Kaladesh a little bit, and how we think that they're going to evolve into Aether Revolt, and talking a little bit about how mechanics in various blocks change between the sets. Because as I've just finished up my Magic History videos talking about Urza's Saga, I found it very interesting that the way they evolved and changed the various mechanics that occurred during that set. Or block, I should say. So that's the first thing. Then I do want to talk about D&D Unearthed Arcana and the new monks, monk archetypes, because those are pretty cool. There's only two of them. One which is a reprint of something that we've seen, and another which is something else entirely. So I think that'll be very cool to talk about. We've talked a little bit about things like this before, but I did want to talk about a little more in depth a horror genre and tabletop games in general, because I think we talked a little bit about horror adventures the last time a Strange Aeons set came out, but a new one again is out. So I do want to sort of draw into the fact that there is this idea of horror that exists, at least attempting it. Things like with Arkham Horror and Elder's Sign, which are very Lovecraftian and trying to be a horror setting. So I do want to talk about that a little bit and what it means to be a horror game and a tabletop game. Of course, then, I do want to talk a little bit about, because there was a lot of releases on it, it's an interesting topic, especially since the first prequel episode of Treasure of the Lost Legion had came out this last Sunday. I do want to talk about fantasy and sci-fi mixing, because I feel like Spelljammer, which is what the game we were playing, or the role-playing game we were doing is more of a fantasy game with some sci-fi mixed in. But then you got something like Shadowrun, which is a sci-fi game with some fantasy mixed in. And I want to talk about those a little bit. Then, of course, we have Stories from the Table, which we've got some good ones to talk about. And we'll move on to Gaming Sage Advice. If you have any questions that you want answered on Gaming Sage Advice, please just remember to put it in the chat. We'll answer it the best we can during that period. If you want to say anything, ask any questions about any of the topics we're discussing, go ahead. As for the channel, I'll be trying to catch up on videos. I was very sick for a portion of this week. It put me behind. As you saw, my Thursday videos went up yesterday, and pretty late in the day, where I finally was able to get them up. As for Treasures of the Lost Legion, because of the holidays and such, I will be trying to record / live stream a couple more of those with people that are joining the game, but I'm not sure if I can before January. So if there's another prequel, won't be until January. It might be that way. It's just that, holiday season, it gets all of us. It gets a busy time of year. So why don't we begin with the basics that we're going to talk about with Aether Revolt and, of course, evolving mechanics and keywords. So we started with, of course, well, why don't we start with talking about what we think they'll evolve in Aether Revolt? Because we already know that they had fabricate and vehicles in Aether Revolt. And as if we look back at some older sets, they keep a lot of the mechanics, but they do also add mechanics or change mechanics, or and we're not just talking about keywords. We are talking about general mechanics too. So I find it very interesting about how they've definitely evolved over the years, and especially in amongst a block, it evolves.
Yes. Trying to think of examples off the top of my head, and I'm failing.
Okay, I got a good one. So let's take it the Urza's block, which I was just, as I said, I had just done the history videos on. They had, of course, what was it? Cycling was first introduced there. Okay, so in the first two sets of the block, cycling seemed normal. They added a version of it that was a cycling from play in the last block. Effectively, what it would be is you'd pay some mana, sacrifice a creature, draw a card. And a lot of these creatures were associated with goes into graveyard effects. So that would be a very good example of ones that have evolved that way. So the question would be, if we are using the way that they've evolved in other sets, because I mean, a lot of times keywords do stay the same between sets. That's true. You'll always see them. But it seems like more like the themes and mechanics sort of evolve a lot more around them. Or maybe they add more keywords too. I mean, we did see, like, for example, the original Zendikar block, it added leveling up and the Eldrazi with Annihilator in the last block of their set, which were very experimental and interesting, but they still had things like their landfall, which they had introduced. They still had that. They had a lot of those like, was it counter enchantments, ones that would get counters on them, things like that. Like things that would awaken lands, you know, stuff like that. These are themes that they established early on, and they did stick with them. But it's like I'd have to remember between all the sets, unfortunately, because it's been a while since I've gone through the Zendikar ones. I did think they changed in between them. Especially then, even if you get to revisiting the set, that they didn't use the same, like, keywords and stuff when they came back to it, which was interesting. Because they did the same with the Ravinica, and I think with Mirrodin also, that they didn't really, when they revisited these places, they didn't do it exactly in the same way when they introduced new stuff. Granted, for Mirrodin, I think they really just, like, proliferate and infect were the major things that they introduced. And Battlecry. But Battlecry was supposed to be representing a change in mentality. The infect and the proliferate were supposed to represent the new Phyrexians. So, I mean, I could understand how they had those, but they didn't have, like, the affinity for artifacts that the original Mirrodin block had. So I think that's a little interesting thing about that there. So that we can see that they sort of keep the blocks separate in a way, but then they also change things within the blocks when it comes to mechanics.
Right, I think they kind of see what works, what doesn't, and keep evolving it.
And they always want to seem like they want to try something different too.
Right, but if it doesn't work, they're not afraid to get rid of something.
That's also true. I'm just interested to see how long it will take us to revisit another place. Because, I mean, we already know we're in somewhere new with Kaladesh. Now, granted, Kaladesh has been mentioned before. It was mentioned in, I think it was one of the Commander's blocks. The one that introduced the... No. It was the Magic Origins. In Magic Origins, they had the flip card planeswalkers that were supposed to represent them as their normal characters, and then when they awakened as planeswalkers. That also pertained to some of the backstory and locations of that. So that's where we got some of the stuff on Kaladesh, was in that set. That was the first time I think we really saw it seriously. There might have been some in Plane Chase. The cards might have had a Kaladesh one. I can't remember if there was or not.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly. You're more up on Magic than I am.
That's a tough question whether it would be or not. Let me just look it up and see if there was one, because I can do that thing. I don't think there was one. Okay.
Yeah, I'm on the wiki right now myself.
So I'm going to assume that there wasn't a card for Kaladesh at the time, because there have been cards for a lot of the sets and blocks that were very unusual. Like, they even have one for, I think it's... if I can remember the name of it, the plane that they eventually called Arabian Nights, because Arabian Nights is supposed to be like this technically plane of 1,000 worlds, that they basically made it canon as a place in the multiverse, but they haven't gone back to that ever.
Right.
I would think that would be an unusual one to go back to. Be fun to, but a very unusual one. I would also love to see Domineering again, but I think we're getting a little bit off topic on what we'd want to see in Magic, of course. But speaking on that level, yeah, I think revisiting something would be interesting, because then again, revisiting some mechanics would be neat too, because I think they have revisited certain mechanics here and there. Like, we have seen cycling return. We have seen various other mechanics return in sets that are different than their originals, definitely. But, I mean... I am definitely interested to see how they're going to evolve the set things in Kaladesh. I think they'll probably will see more vehicles. I'm sure of it.
Oh yeah. And the other one, the
Fabricate.
Yeah. Now I could see them expanding Fabricate maybe to like different types of Fabricate or something. You know, getting different abilities with Fabricate, you know. They could start doing different, like, subcategories of it or something.
Yeah. Huh. Because, I mean, they have released a bit, but I think the only ones that they've showed off is they've showed vehicles, and they have shown a new keyword. But the question is improvise, where you can use... which I'm not quite understanding 100% from how I've read it. Wait... sorry. I think that was on my end, if anybody got that. I'm trying to find information out, and guess what? Speakers. Improvise. Your artifacts can help cast this spell. Each artifact you tap after you're done activating mana abilities pays for 1. Which, the thing is, I think they've done that before, but they're doing this specifically for artifacts, it sounds like. And
interesting.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's definitely an interesting concept, because it is, again, I really think it is a copy of, what ability was it? It was the, Affinity? Not Affinity, the one where you could tap creatures to pay for its mana cost. I'm forgetting the ability's called now. Because
no, it's not Affinity. I know what you're talking about. Elves had that a lot at one point.
Yes.
You know, tap X amount of elves.
Well, it was just you could tap
X amount of creatures to produce mana, basically, to cast.
Yeah. Let me see if I can find that keyword out. Counter Absorb, Amplify Affinity Annihilator, Bestow Battlecard Bloodthirst, Bushido was it Cascade?
No, Cascade card. Cascade could be in the Lightning.
Convoke.
That's
it. Convoke. You tapped creatures though. Oh.
Right. So now you're tapping artifacts. It's the same thing, but it's the artifact ability.
And that makes sense for this set. So I see that as definitely a variation on an existing keyword, which is actually kind of cool now that I can see that. Okay. That's very good. Yeah, alright. Okay. So I think that's we haven't seen a lot that yet, though. I mean, we've seen like one vehicle, a number of like rares, the 2 planeswalkers from the 2 planeswalkers deck, the other version of a Johnny, and a few other things. They have not shown a lot of other cards as of yet, it seems. Though they are... Oh, that's right. Because apparently, we probably will see a nickel bolus in the new set, though, because of a single spell which mentions if you cast a bolus planeswalker spell.
Ah.
But that leads into the next set, but that's an entirely different matter whatsoever, because the next set is Amonkhet, which is all about a plane controlled by Nicol Bolas. So, I mean, with a very Egyptian flair from what I've seen.
Well,
Like,
yeah, that's what it definitely sounds that way with just the name.
yeah. So, I mean, I'm interested to see what they do for mechanics in that one, definitely. But we haven't seen any energy, and we haven't seen the fabricate ability on anything in the spoilers yet. So I do get the feeling that we will, of course, see energy and fabricate, because those seem normally most mechanics do stay around, and energy being something very specific to Kaladesh, I'm sure it's going to stay with both of the sets in the block. That makes perfect sense. You know, if it doesn't, that would be confusing. Why would you do it that way?
Right.
So, But anyway, why don't we sort of just speculated a little bit about what we can find, and it's hard to say what else they'll add. We've seen that they've evolved something in Aether Revolt, and we've seen that they have definitely are probably going to keep at least a few of the keywords that they've already had. And it does seem like Magic experiments a lot and then learns lessons and always evolves things. Because, I mean, like, I think things like the Urza's block, as I keep going back to it because it's the one that's in my mind most recently, it had a lot of experiments to it. And it caused a lot of problems as it was seen, because it had the combo winter existed for that time. That if you were playing that block, there is still more specifically block bans if you're playing an Urza's deck than any other block, I think, other than maybe like Unlimited.
Right.
Because they had such ridiculous combos built out of the Urza's block. Why don't we move on? Just because this is a interesting topic, but it's very freeform in the way that you discuss it. And we probably will come back to this maybe when we know some more information about Aether Revolt in the future. Kind of knowing more about what's going on with the set, how Magic is continuing to evolve their stuff. Because it's always interesting to look at how they're changing the keywords. There was a period in time I would think that it could reach a maximum power potential. But when you look back at some of their old things that, I mean, we went through, it's like, wow, those are kind of ridiculous even now. I mean, the legendary lands that tap for Gaia's Cradle. That's kind of ridiculous and kind of broken. Expensive,
Right.
but definitely. Anyway, let's move on. So our next topic is, of course, Unearthed Arcana is continuing. Dungeon Dragons has let us know that for a little while at least, they're going to keep with weekly releases on Unearthed Arcana. They eventually will switch back to once or twice a month, and then we'll have less of these to talk about. And of course, these are really more play testing these are traditions or archetypes for different classes. They will put out other things too, but they've been on a kick for, we choose a class, put out some various archetypes. You know, they had the cleric domains, bardic colleges. This time it's monastic traditions, which they have 2 new ones that you can check out. And both of them are very interesting. One of them is based around more of a prestige class that was in 3rd edition. I don't remember if they did anything about it in 4th. It's hard to remember.
Which one?
Way of the Kensai, because there was a Kensai you could play. I remember that.
Oh, right. I forgot about that.
Yeah, that was a prestige class you could play, Kensai. So Way of the Kensai is all about a weapon that they're training with. They gain proficiency in a number of martial weapons, and it's considered a Kensai weapon. So it's doing something beyond just a monk weapon. They choose use to strength or dexterity. You know, you're using it that you're getting bonuses when fighting with this one weapon. They eventually treat it as magic. They eventually can overcome defenses better. things like this that, like, it's all about their weapon. And I do think it's very interesting to match with the normal monk while it's built. I think I do.
Yeah, because traditionally weapons are good up into a certain level, and then your fists are 10 times better than any weapon you could use.
Yeah, and the thing about this is I find it very interesting and very different sort of feeling than the other monk archetypes from what I've read on of them. I really have more experience reading through the elemental one, which gains like spell abilities, which from what my discussions with people, it's unfortunately weaker than the other one, even though the like the martial artist type, which I kind of thought was sad because I liked the elemental fist. I liked the way it sounded more than anything, but I could understand that, where you sort of get spells that you can use key points for, but they're not great.
Right. And then I had the Hungry Ghost Monk, which was interesting.
Well, that was Pathfinder, and that was Pathfinder.
Right.
Mm-hmm. We have more experience with Pathfinder monks, and that's for sure. Because I don't think, as I said, I was reading through more the Elemental Fist, but I don't think I've had a chance to play any of them, and I don't think you have either.
No, I when I did a lot of D&D in 3.0 and 3.5, I typically either did a rogue or a sorcerer.
Yeah, and I tried to have variety, but I never got into monks because there was always someone that really preferred monks and would complain if we were doing monks incorrectly or something. And
yeah,
I think they had a lot more attitude in the way they should be played. But I kind of feel like these monastic traditions open up a little bit more, and it seems like these are very interesting versions of them. They're very different.
One of the things I like with also Path of the Kensi is you actually can get a bonus damage on using the pummel to knock someone out.
Yeah, that's cool. I think it's little things like that that really make it very interesting. There's like little ways that they make it that it's really cool to be fighting with a weapon in hand. But the thing is, they open it up that it just says a martial weapon. It doesn't say, like, because it's specifically in the it says a sword or bow. You totally could be using a bow, and it says you can choose attack, strength, or dexterity, meaning I could be a Way of the Kensai monk using strength for my attack and damage for a bow.
Yeah,
that would be really kind of cool to do. It'd be really weird. And I could use my martial arts dice for it, but I could be shooting a bow with like I'm not going to do that because I was just going to do that though, like the bad martial arts thing. I was just about to do it, but thwunk, and then punch someone with it or something. I don't know.
Okay, so you're Green Arrow.
Yeah. Okay. Green Arrow. Yeah. Sure.
That's basically what you become if you're using a bow with the Way of the Kensi. Is your Green Arrow.
How about oh my god, I'm blanking out on his name. The Avengers one, Purple.
Oh, I know who you're talking about. I can't think of his name either. Oh gosh.
Hawkeye.
Hawkeye, yeah. As we both think of it at the same time.
Yes.
Okay, yes, you're a combination of Hawkeye and Green Arrow.
Yeah, because then you could always just be holding the bow in one hand and punching people, and you'd have a +2 AC bonus, and you'd be like, wah, 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 wah. Damn it, I did it then. I apologize to anyone of, like, any kind of martial arts training for that one. I'm doing bad, like, kung fu dubbed movie sound effects.
Yes. But also, I wonder, with you able to use the pummel of the weapon, could you use then the bow itself to do an extra 1d4 bludgeoning damage, like hitting someone over the head with it?
I don't know. I just find it interesting because you automatically think like a sword or something, or maybe an axe, but it could be a bow, which I find that really cool.
You could use it as a garrote wire.
I know.
Oh, weird things you could do with weapons. Depending on the DM.
Yeah, oh my god. Yeah, uh-huh.
And then you have the Way of Tranquility, which is interesting.
Yeah, the Way of Tranquility is way different. That's the only thing I have to say about it. It's I find it I would find it a very interesting character to play, but I don't think it would work in every game is the problem.
No,
Because,
it's definitely kind of like a religion, more emphasis on the religion and the monk.
yeah, I think it's well, maybe not. Let's say not the religion because
Okay, it's kind of like a cross between a cleric and a monk.
yeah, a little bit. It has that like sort of ideology, of stuff that would be similar to religion without being actually religious.
Yeah.
Because you get healing, you get sanctuary. I mean, that's just
Sanctuary.
yeah. You can calm emotions or counsel peace, and you have advantage on this sort of thing. And it's like, wow. You can calm
Okay,
violent
Anger
impulse.
the Gentle Soul though is kind of badass.
Yeah.
It's like you just took my friend down to 0 hit points. Ah!
Yeah. Yep. Mm-hmm. Because as it says, it pushed their capable warriors that can bring it end to the unjust. So I think it's very interesting that you attempt it. Definitely, there are plenty of games where it would work. I do see that. You wouldn't. It maybe not like a dungeon crawl, but maybe like just a general adventure. Like I think you could probably have had a Way of Tranquility in something like Curse of Strahd, because Curse of Strahd has a lot of opportunities for not battling it too, and you might be able to work with that. Possibly. Maybe that's not as good as some of the others, and that would still be more of a challenge. But
I think that definitely if you have a game where you can diplomatize your way out of things, like it's a Pathfinder one, but the one we did with the monsters and the ghosts,
Carrion Crown, was that
Carrion Crown, yeah, like the mission where you're trying to with the Frankensteinish type monster.
Oh, the second one, Trial of the Beast. Yeah.
Yeah, that's where a monk could, one of these monks could come in handy.
So something like that kind of adventure where there's a lot of diplomacy, a lot of sort of role playing aspects to it, a lot of keeping the peace.
Yeah, definitely something high in role plays. You're gonna have to. It would be more useful, and if it's more of a fight game, then you're kind of a lame duck then.
Well, I still think you'd be useful.
You'd be useful, but you wouldn't be going the route that it's trying to take you, I think.
Yeah, I mean, if you're doing something, as I said, like a traditional dungeon crawl, where you might be fighting like a lot of monsters without intelligence. It definitely is not going to fit as well. I do agree on that one.
Yeah, you definitely need more of more of a role play aspect for this kind of character to really shine.
That's very true.
And it also depends on the group you're with. I mean, you have groups we've had groups that could do diplomacy and things, but we've had a lot of groups that diplomacy goes right out the window.
That is true. We have encountered that before, unfortunately.
You caught me monologuing.
Oh my god.
Bad guys in the middle of a long speech, and someone just pulls out a bow and shoots him in the throat.
And sets us behind by 5 sessions.
Yes,
because
they decided, we don't care about the story. We want to just kick this guy's butt.
We were going to kick his butt anyway. Could you at least waited a few minutes?
Nope. Now.
Ugh. Yep. That's a story for another day, though. But but yeah. It really does depend on group too. Which was another interesting discussion I've had recently about group dynamics. How maybe you want to role play a lot, and then you get people that just want to be hack and slash, and you have to make sure you know the group you're playing with is another thing too. Both as a GM and a DM, or a DM and a player. So,
Right.
no, I think these are two interesting ones. I kind of find it interesting that they've only put out 2 for the monk, and they've had a couple more for each of the other ones, but they do seem to have an interesting mix of trying to bring back things from the past and coming up with new stuff. And the things from the past are really cool, like the Kensai and like things like the Arcane Archer and stuff like that. But the new stuff they've come up with has been very interesting too, because it's been a lot of experimental takes that, I don't think we've really encountered that same way before. Like, this is a really, out there kind of concept for a monk, but I like the idea of it.
Yeah. It's definitely a different, take on it, and, adds a new flavor.
Very true. Well, why don't we move on while we still have some time, because I might want to end... I'm still a little sick and have work to catch up on, so I might want to end a little early. Let's talk about horror and tabletop games in general, because yet another one of the Strange Aeons Adventure Path for Pathfinder came out, and I found them interesting because they are having someone that ran Carrion Crown, which was Pathfinder's previous take on horror. And I've attempted to play a couple of their horror adventures. Like, I tried to play the Hangman's Noose, which went over poorly. That went over so poorly, because the unfortunate thing about that one is it had a lot of horror tropes in it. So people were already catching on to what was going to happen, sort of things, without anything actually happening. Which kind of made it very poor.
Yeah.
And people weren't, and the unfortunate thing is the team of people I had weren't playing along with it, which really kind of sucked. It just fell apart. We never finished it. We didn't get that far. But as I was trying to say earlier, there have been a lot of other more horror-themed games out. Not just that. If we talk about board games, we have all of the ones in the Arkham series, like Arkham Horror, Elder Sign, Mansions of Madness. Each of these has a very distinct Lovecraftian horror themes to it. Think of all the different zombie games that are out there. Most of them tend to be either action or survival based, but they really are more of like a horror type game. Dead Winter, for example, is a survival one. On the other hand, Zombies is more of a action one where you're going around fighting zombies in a city in order to both escape, but also to see how many ones you can kill.
Right.
If you talk about card games, I think that's a lot less.
Ascension a little bit.
Yeah, okay, Ascension but that's more boards. That's more of a deck building game, though, I'd say.
Yeah.
I was thinking more like Magic's tried on horror a little bit with things like both times they visited Innistrad, but that's really, I feel that's like classic Universal Monsters horror, so it doesn't really have the same pool as today, vampires, Frankenstein monsters kind of thing, werewolves.
Oh, I got one. It's
okay.
A little bit, it's still a deck builder game, but the one I just bought, oh God, with all the P's in its name.
Yeah, the Professor one.
Yeah, something. It's steampunk versus Cthulhian horrors.
Yeah, and see, that one does have a horror theme to it. Probably, I would say, Vampire for a role-playing game always has a level of horror to it, even though
and werewolf.
And werewolf, just because you are the monster sort of thing, and you have to live with it. And in that sort of vein, the Vampire collectible card game definitely had that same feel to it. That's a collectible card game for you that has some horror feel. So I think there's always been there's a lot of material that has horror. But what I really wanted to talk about with it today, I don't think any of it is really throws over. I think you can maybe establish it a little bit with role-playing games, but the board games and the collectible card games / deck building games, they have the theme, but I don't think they have the feel.
Right.
Like, I can play Arkham Horror all I want, and I like playing Arkham Horror, even though it takes them forever to play. But I don't, it's sort of like, oh, you get the crushing feeling of defeat is always looming at you in that game, but that's about it. It's like, you just think, oh, this game is hard. It's like, oh no, I'm going to lose to Cthulhu. No, it's this game is hard. Which is, I guess, a different kind of feel. And even horror games and role-playing games is really hard. Like, as I said, like Vampire and Werewolf a little bit, but it also depends on the adventure you're building, and it depends on the atmosphere. My experiences with Werewolf and Vampire have that vein in there, but never really throw it forth. The experiences in things like running Carrion Crown and now Curse of Strahd, there's definitely horror veins in it, but really, really, like, weighing home that fear just doesn't seem to be there.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of hard because we all know the traditional horror tropes, like you said, and it's hard to get, suspend that in your mind in a game.
Yeah. It's like, even when I see, like, other people run some of these games online, like Curse of Strahd and stuff, I don't feel... Like, I can feel there are points and times where, yeah, you can always get characters to make them feel, like, afraid. You can get them in situations where, like, oh, we're in trouble, we have to do this and try to avoid that, and it makes us worry. But it's not the same kind of fear. That's a more like, oh, there's danger in the current moment. Maybe there's danger all around us at all times, but it's not like, oh my god, the overwhelming fear of something unknown. It's like, oh, there's something over there that might get us.
Right.
So I think, I don't know, it's just, like, well, go ahead.
I was going to say, the closest thing I've come to it is you really have to set the mood of where you're playing.
Yes.
You have to have a kind of more, a darker room, a kind of atmosphere to get into that kind of thing. Where if you don't, it's definitely harder for a player to kind of get that feeling.
And I'll admit I've been mixed bag with atmosphere, but it's also sometimes hard for atmosphere because, like, let's say you're in a room. If you make it really dark in there, people can't see things for, like, their character sheets and dice and stuff too. Okay. Right. Mood music. I guess you could come up with, like, just some kind of track that repeats in the background constantly, but that can get annoying. Changing the music can be distracting too. As someone that's played around with changing music, it's fun. It just add to interest to have, like, background music, but it can be distracting when you're trying to, like, fiddle around with what's the next one to have after this one.
Right.
It's little things like that I think definitely.
It takes a lot more preparation to set the mood and everything. You kind of have to have everything scored out ahead of time. You have to take a lot more time.
Give me a second. Develop. I think this is an important call.
Okay.
Hello? Hi, I was live streaming. What do you want? Quickly. I was live streaming. She's in the hospital for observation. Doesn't look like anything major. Yeah, doesn't look like anything major. Just looks like maybe some kind of stress or something. They're keeping her for observation. We'll know once she gets home later on tonight. All right, bye. Sorry, everybody. That was actually relatively important. Just a little background information because you want to know. My grandmom had some problems. My mother wanted to know what was going on with her. Everything's okay, though. Okay with my family. No major problems. Sorry about the interruption, though. Just, she was curious about that. We were concerned, that sort of thing. Anyway, she was concerned of this morning before we found out that she was okay. Relatively speaking. You were talking, Joe. Sorry for the interruption.
I forget where I was. I was just saying it takes a lot more, planning to
Oh yeah. Oh.
do something like that. You have to really have a lot of time in your hands.
And even then, the mood doesn't always work. I've tried low lights, I've tried music, and it doesn't always instill everything, because then it also has to deal with the story. It has to deal with how well the players you have, how well they're diving into the game. I think in order for a good horror actual game, you need people that are willing to be roleplay heavy. Hack and slash people will not deal with horror very well, because they're just gonna hack and slash it, you know.
Right.
They're not gonna embrace it. And I think people in the middle, they might be okay, but you really need some good role-playing people in order to sort of like add to it. People that can get into character, I think, is like the only way you're gonna do that. And finding those people or getting together the right group of people can be difficult, because like I think our group of people, we're okay at getting into character. I think you're pretty good at getting into character. I know a couple, like our one friend Chad's good at getting into character. Mike's okay. James is okay, and Megan's are okay. So see, those are 3 okay people. So we have 2 good people and 3 okay people. And I don't think that's a great team for getting into horror. You know? And I think that's actually the group that I just described is probably one of the better groups that we have in amongst all the people that we roleplay with in real life. So
yeah. True. I mean, it's hard to find. It's hard to find players in general a lot of times, especially if you're trying to do it locally and live in a group, not like over the internet or something. Mm-hmm. I mean, for me, I think my background in acting and stuff helped me with
yes.
getting into role playing. That's actually what interested me in role playing, was the fact of taking on a character and stuff like that. Kind of jived with what I was doing at the time already with theater and stuff. So I think that that helps me be able to get into a character, and also my writing background helps me to try to flesh out a character that I can get really into its mindset.
See, since I started mostly like DMing and stuff, I think that's where my skill came from, because I did very little player work before I started DMing, technically speaking. Before I started basically making stories and characters of my own and having to like come up with the various voices and stuff about them. And that helped develop me, as that I'm pretty good at getting into a character to myself and role-playing them and trying to keep with a good mindset. I mean, granted, it also I think depends on the game and the game/dungeon master. I think that helps too. If you've got a very engaging game and / dungeon master, it helps you get into it a lot easier. I mean, like, for example, I like getting into it more with our pirate game. I feel like just because, for just a little bit of a reason, because there's a little bit more flair into it. I like doing that a little bit more when I'm getting into character. On the other hand, I just don't feel like I'm getting into character as much when it comes to Rise of the Rune Lords, because it feels more cookie cutter out of the book a little bit. And I feel like we just don't hit those moments as much in the story the way it's being run. Like my Curse of Strahd is very different than anybody else's Curse of Strahd is going to be. And I like how it's going. We had what, like a wagon chase with dire wolves.
Yep.
We have someone changing into a werewolf and now a Medusa. Don't ask.
Oh God, yes. We've had I think it's part of it is we have some newer type players who haven't role played a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So they make interesting choices that people who have role played a lot might not.
Yes.
And we also have some people who think way outside the box.
Mm-hmm. Well, James is just getting into being a good role player, and he thinks outside the box, though. So he comes up with really weird ideas. Megan is being drawn into it more and more, and I think she really enjoys it because, like, she just ends up in these weird situations for her character, and I think it just evolves the character very well.
Oh yeah, that's what I'm saying. We have an interesting, you have, me, Chad, and Mike are more the seasoned players,
mm-hmm.
and then you have Megan, who's pretty new, and then you have James, who is a little bit more on the new side than the rest of us, and has an interesting spark of creativity and silliness at times.
Well, I would call
that can work.
Yeah, I'd call him a role player that doesn't do a lot of role playing until more recently. I think that's the best way to describe it, is that he started out more the kind of cut and dry, more, he's there doing it, sort of gaming kind of thing. And by the end of, Carry On Crown, he was starting to get some of that spark. And I think since then, he's really developed that his voice is, I can now sort of, roleplay. But he goes for very peculiar role-playing, which isn't always bad.
No.
But it does require some control, which I've seen being a mixed bag between the people that have been running games with him. I think I've been a little better, definitely in Curse of Strahd, controlling it, because I just let random chance, and random chance favored him that last time he did something really weird, though it has also ended up screwing him over in the same world setting.
Yes. But it's interesting to see what he comes up with. I mean, I think he has, because he's just kind of finding his, way in it, that he still has that interesting creative spark. I used to have a little bit more of that. I've come a little more complacent.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I need to get back to that a little bit. Not to the ridiculous forms I have in the past.
To capybaras and candelabras.
Well, that's James.
He likes a good capybara. He likes a good candelabra.
Yes. I don't know what his obsession with capybaras are, though.
They're like a gold in Pathfinder to purchase one. They have the price listing and
I know, but I don't know what his obsession with them are.
I have to explain they're the size of a medium dog to him every time. They're pretty big animals, and he's like, I can purchase 20 of them. What are you going to do? How are you transporting them? You could have one in a backpack, and it's filling your backpack. It's a large, dumb rodent. Everything eats it. There's a reason everything eats it.
Not to mention when we had it in the one inn, which pretty much was a room full of capybaras on everything.
That game fell apart, so it's okay.
I know. But still, it's I don't think the innkeeper would allow it. I think he would consider it an infestation of capybaras.
They're really large, too. But getting back, since we did digress a little bit away from the original topic, yeah, a good group, I think, helps so much. That you need to find people that are very good with playing a character. Or that you can open them up to playing a character. And you don't want to force it as a dungeon master. You want to be able to find the right voice in order to have them do that. And that can be a challenge. I think I've helped Megan a lot in opening that voice up. Granted, there was some, there's been some troubles too, I definitely understand. Trying to figure out what to say to a bunch of Vrox in order to get them to stop. But eventually, when she sort of got her stride with that, she kind of made it work.
Right, and that's why I wanted to bow out of that situation of, I'm not going to speak or suggest anything. I want her to be able to, figure it out on her own.
Yeah, which is
help
good.
Find her voice.
Because then next time, she might be better at it. And it was a situation where her voice was important. That she was the one that could speak to them.
Yes. And I was getting mauled to death.
You theoretically could take them.
I was down to 2 hit points.
I only said theoretically.
I learned my lesson. Don't fly over a wall.
Or at least be cautious when things move on top of the wall as soon as you approach them in the first place.
Well, that's why I flew up and teleported, because I figured, well, that keeps me away from whatever's up there, and maybe I won't activate it then. I tried to think around the situation.
It was fine. It was a fine thought pattern. It just didn't work.
Because going through the fire, I probably would have died anyway.
It would have probably dropped you.
Yes. So I was between a rock and a hard place, so I tried to use a workaround.
It's true. Anyway, why don't we move on? Just because with my first Spelljammer episode out, the prequel starring you, of all people, as Kellen the Rogue, we've had the first episode, well, at least first prequel episode of Treasure of the Lost Legion, my new Spelljammer 5th edition campaign. We eventually will be setting up Roll D20. I'm still experimenting with that. I still haven't fully figured it out. I probably will implement it either by the time the next prequel comes out or by the time we start. I'm just noting that now. So, but with that coming out, I did want to talk about the mixtures of sci-fi and fantasy, because that does seem to be something that exists in a number of settings. This isn't the only one that exists in. I'd say this is the one that is most predominant. We, of course, have Spelljammer, which is one, where it's really you're a fantasy setting, well, fantasy going into sci-fi. You're going into space. You're exploring space. There's also Shadowrun, which is a futuristic setting with fantasy, where there's magic, elves, and dwarfs.
You have my game that I created.
That's true.
Underworld.
But
that has a bit of both. It has a little
bit
of both.
It does because you added aliens in. Because you added a science fiction, but yours is like also historical, so that makes something else in the mix.
Yeah. But then and then I have also the mole people.
And vampires.
And vampires, which kind of
vampires added
fantasy.
Vampire enters a fantasy setting, and unusual races like a mole people does enter into a fantasy setting. Can. Yeah. So the thing is, like, you do add in a mixture of those things with the setting you made up, and I know there are other settings that add it together, and do exist in this kind of juxtaposition between the two of them. But I think those are the two that mix them the best. Like, there's definitely others that I've heard about that will have an existing kind of combination of them, but as I said, just not as common as a thing. Like mixing magic and technology, it does exist.
It's just it's a rarer role-playing form than others.
Yeah.
I think it goes kind of fantasy, sci-fi, and then a mix.
Well, there's also like other settings. You of course have like more just modern settings, supernatural settings, which are like, it's similar to fantasy, but those are like, I call those more like vampire, because it has some fantasy elements to it, but when you're really playing in the modern day, it feels supernatural rather than fantasy at that point in time. When you get actual fanciful elements in Shadowrun, you get like spirits and stuff, you get like, when you go to like a magic lodge, it's supposed to feel like a combination between, like, especially if it's like Hermetic tradition, it's supposed to feel like you're going into like a technology-based version of Gandalf's lair, you know, that kind of thing. It really is supposed to feel like that, with like old books, candles, and incense. I mean, it has that fantasy feel to it, and especially with like a lot of the ways, you know, it's supposed to feel that way, that it has this mixture of, and you're talking elves, dwarfs, and trolls, and orcs, are all these races that you have in Shadowrun. Spelljammer is a lot less, because they mix in, like, we have spaceships, we have guns and smoke powder. You know, they look at themselves as being, like, superior to the ground-based people because they have this knowledge and technology and things like that.
I'd almost put it almost in the steampunk realm.
A little bit steampunk, yeah.
Steampunk with magic.
Yeah, a little bit like that. It's taking a level up from the technology, definitely, in Spelljammer, but it doesn't hit that true... It has, like, science fiction elements to it without hitting true science fiction, I think. So I think that's in the lower end of this mixture. That they, like, took some, like things like tropes and suggestions from sci-fi and added it into their game and kept it, though, very fantasy-based. While Shadowrun's the opposite end. It's very sci-fi, with just those little threads of fantasy put in there. I think they are some of my favorite settings, though, which is a kind of odd thing, that their mixtures are like that, are such fun settings for me.
No, they're definitely, because it's something that we don't do all the time, and it's nice to, change it up now and then.
That's very true. A little bit of variety helps a lot, I think.
Yeah, it helps keep you from getting stagnant as a player or a GM, and keeps the mind flowing. I'm really excited with trying to do the new game, Spelljammer.
Yeah.
One, because it's a system I haven't tried before.
Yes.
And two, that it'd be interesting also, one, to try the new online playing format. I haven't done that before either. And also get some new players in the mix that I haven't played before. That because we do have our kind of traditional groups now that has grown out a little bit in the past few years, but we haven't since I think the local game store that we frequented a few years ago really gotten an injection of new players and people we haven't played with before.
And we got 3 people, and 2 of which I rarely play with or do anything with anymore anyway. That's
right.
The unfortunate thing, because
out of all of them, we pretty much got James, which is a good thing. He's been a great addition.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Not that the other people weren't good additions. It's just...
And there was a lot of other little people, too, that, we had contacts with, but things never worked out for the schedule, or... I think that was before I really took a break from GMing, which I kind of think I was entering into a slump at the time, because Carry on Crown, I don't think I ran it as nearly as good as I could have. I do have to say. I think especially towards the end, I was just racing towards the end. I was just pushing towards it.
We also had a really weird group with that. We had a lot of unexperienced players who and that was Carrying Crown was more heavy on the role playing, and I think that's harder for newer players at times.
And we had a lot of character switching and a lot of problems keeping characters and weird problems with new people sometimes and things like that. A lot of stuff occurred throughout the entire history of that game. And location changes. There was 3 location changes.
Yeah.
No, 4 actually. 4 location changes.
There was the game store.
Game store number 2, which was the same game store, just moved to another location.
Right, which that location wasn't as good.
The diner.
Did it the diner and then Justin's house.
Yep. 4 locations does not help to have a non-consistency for a game.
Right,
granted,
and it also changed who was available to play and everything else too.
What the game store, we had the first time we started playing it, we had a huge variety of players and a good variety of team. And what I think of that original group that was at that game store, I have you, and Justin.
Yeah.
Was the only ones from the original people that started at the game store for the first adventure that stuck with it. Because James came in a little while later at the game store, and Rob showed up eventually, but I don't remember when. I don't think he was at the beginning.
Yeah, I forget when he joined in.
Yeah, because Sneakers wasn't there for original, to start out with. Sneakers came in.
Honestly, I don't remember him until maybe the diner. I think he knew someone else.
He came in during the second game store at some point in time.
Okay.
But I think it was towards the back end of it when we were going to the diner.
Yeah, he might have only been at the second game store for a session or 2.
Yeah. So that's the thing is those are the core people. James, Rob, you, and Justin were really the players that were doing Carrion Crown in my second playthrough of it. Because I was doing it twice, which is, I guess, that's a stupid idea, to run the same game twice. I would not recommend it. You get tired of running it, and you repeat the same things, even if you don't want to. You do. Right. You when you try to do the creativity for both of them, it doesn't always work. Granted, there were some very interesting things that happened in both of them. I liked some of the things that happened with our core group's version of it. Poirier wild shaping into a bird to break into someone's office. them getting the fighter laid, and he fighting a giant spider while naked because it was they basically were like, we'll celebrate your birthday, go ahead on us, at these prostitutes. And it was fortunate it was nearby to where the giant spider attacked, so he goes running out like naked fighting a giant spider with his sword only, and it's like, oh my god. But that's what they set up, and that was fun stuff. But that's the other group,
right?
And I think there was some definite problems with the game store group with the inexperience, because like unfortunately there was and it was the worst kind of experience for those players, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we had some really unfortunate people who tried to join, and it really did not work out with them, which the short time they were in the game kind of
also
made it bad for others.
Too much character death. Too much occurred in Carrion Crown, and I couldn't do anything to stop it because people kept doing stuff, and it was like beyond my ability to save people. I tried to here and there, but...
Well, you could... The thing is, when someone does something over the top stupid, it's hard to be like, this isn't going to kill you somehow?
Running through a blade barrier a couple of times and then standing in a blade barrier. Eventually, you will be chopped to pieces.
There's no stopping stupidity sometimes.
And it happened a bunch. That was the problem. There was too much character changing in that game, and... it was too much of a precedence that, like, I let people sometimes change characters and things like that.
Yeah, it's like, I'm not enjoying this anymore. I'm going to be a different person now.
See, I have to learn to say no to that. Or to control it better.
Right.
And there have to be consequences for actions, which a certain person in Curse of Strahd will learn there will be definite consequences for actions on something similar he just did.
Yeah.
Consequences that would be bad for your team.
Yeah, I already see that coming. I saw that coming a mile away. I'm like, don't just let yourself be... Oh, God darn it. It's like, this is... letting yourself get killed is going to bite us in the end. Literally, probably.
It really will. I haven't decided the full extent of how it will, but you know it's coming at some point in time. When it seems proper for me to do.
This is why you don't just be like, I'm bored of a character. I don't want to do it anymore.
Well, I admit that he didn't like clerics that much, and he sort of was shoehorned into it. And I understand that's a problem, getting shoehorned into a class. I think that was something that we have to work on better when we're making characters, is have discussion on classes and stuff. Like, just... because the thing is, you could have anybody in the team. You guys didn't need a cleric. I've seen Curse of Strahd run without a cleric, and it works just fine.
Yeah, it's just... Clerics are traditionally a very helpful class to have in a group.
And especially with... But the thing is, the way they set it up in 5th edition, it's not needed. But,
true, because you have the rest and everything that help out a lot.
But we've been digressing once again from the topic, because we're really great at doing that. So yeah, sci-fi games mixture. It's gonna depend on what were we even talking about? Oh my god, how did we even get on this topic?
We started talking about other games. We were originally just doing sci-fi fantasy mixed game.
We were talking about players for it. Yeah, we were talking about players for it. So yeah, it's a very interesting mixture of genres. And I think it'll be fun. I think it'll be fun to continue with it. And I'm hoping that people will enjoy Spelljammer when we really dive into it really heavily. I'm hoping that'll be a good one for people to enjoy.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to doing something, different than I've done before.
Yep. All right. So let's move on to stories from the table. Yay! So I was going to have a different topic this week, but because... of some cancellations because of sickness and unfortunate, holiday busyness that came up, we're going to have a different one today because we talked about it a little bit last week with Andrew. We talked about our 4th edition game, and I want to talk about the good parts of that we liked, because this is a little bit of an extension on the topic I was going to have for this week, which I was going to talk about games that we didn't think we'd like but did enjoy in a certain way. Our 4th edition game, again, I will mention this because I enjoyed 4th edition for what it was. It just wasn't a traditional D&D game. And again, not that you couldn't roleplay in it, it was just more challenging to roleplay in it than most other game systems. And we just did pre-made adventures, which maybe doesn't help either. Pre-made adventures never really help for role-playing. It's up to the GM to... It's actually, I think, a little step up for the GM to establish role-playing in a pre-made adventure. Just a little more challenging. Not that it couldn't be done, you know?
Right.
So, all right. So our 4th edition game, as we said last week, we took turns playing it. Our friend Chad, who was our person that got the 4th edition stuff to begin with, he was our first GM, and we were doing the book series that we fought against Orcus. Let me find out what the name of it, because that's probably... list of D&D adventures, 4th edition. Where are you? Huh. I cannot find... 4th edition. Oh, okay. Here they are, because it's got all 3 that we did. The Heroic series... The Paragon series. Yeah, cool. There was 9 of them. That's right, because there was... Yes, there was. Because there was the Heroic, the Paragon, and the Epic series. Give me a second here. You can watch TV in the background. I don't mind. Sorry, my niece. She's come downstairs probably for lunch. Okay, so the first one was we finished Keep of Shadowfell, the Thunderspire Labyrinth, and the Pyramid of Shadows. You had started the King of the Trollhunter Warriors. I was going to do Assault on Nightworm Fortress, I think. I don't know if I was going to do that one or Demon Queen's Enclave. I'm not sure at this point in time.
Right.
And there was 3 others after that, because I think we were going to repeat at some point in time. Because, so Keep of Shadowfell, that's the first one we did, and Chad ran that one. That was when we met our characters, which our characters were introduced a very interesting way. We had, of course, Cindy's character, who was a Goliath barbarian, who goes to this one city and runs across you, your character, and my characters. Your character has like a bag of loot on his back, running from the forces of the guards, having been like caught being a thief, and I'm like holding this bloody dagger, having eliminated someone, cough, 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 an opponent, as my tiefling warlock, and I think you were a gnomish rogue, and I'm like, clang, and you're like, drop, and you're like, and he's just like, you two look trustworthy, why don't you join my quest? And we're like, sure. We were not trustworthy whatsoever.
Yeah, but you know what? It was a way to get out of the situation I was in.
Same with me.
It's like, I'm running for the law. You guys seem to be a way to get out of here. Totally going with you.
I think we like looked at each other, realized what was going on, and we're like, yeah. You're like, nice loot.
Yeah, we all want to get out of here.
You're
Bye.
like, I'm like, nice loot. You're like, nice dagger. Right. Because the other thing is, it never came up, but I was playing an evil tiefling warlock. It like never came up. I just kind of was like a jerk a couple of times when we were actually able to roleplay.
Yeah.
So that was the first of us. We ended up with a whole cast of characters. There was what were the like the wild folk or something? The like shifters, I think they might have been.
Yeah, I think there was shifters.
Poirier was a shifter. There was a shifter warden, a shifter, I don't remember, spell sword maybe. There ended up, that was Rebecca. Autumn.
Yeah.
Because it was Autumn and River, the two who may or may not have been related. I think they were. They was a joke. There was the Warforged Druid. But that was Colin, who rarely showed up. And Who else was there? Was it just the... It might have just been that group.
I think it was. It's been so long.
Yeah, I don't think there was anybody else. But Chad put an NPC of his own into that game, though, was the thing. To represent himself, because he wasn't going to run it every time. He had,
Right.
I think he was the spell sword, which was kind of sad. It kind of was. So that did take us to... Like, we went after the kobolds, and it was really fun because the parts of 4th edition where it has very fun tactical board game aspects, or tactical aspects, I really have to say, for their combats. Oh, they were the best. They were the best. And I just heard someone recently talking about 4th edition, and I do have to agree. As much as it was weird the way they did a lot of characters and stuff, they were really well balanced, actually. You know, that's the thing is, like, I don't think about it. That, you know, 5th edition, it's pretty well balanced. But 4th edition, if you break down how the characters were, they were more balanced. They really were. They were the most balanced.
They were. It was definitely a balance. There wasn't anything wrong with character creation or anything like that. For me, it was just it didn't promote the role-playing aspect enough.
And it did feel like a lot of video game role-playing games, too, I think.
Yeah.
And that was one of those things. And... Again, not that that's a terrible thing, because I think they were trying to bring in a new audience with 4th edition. And it did, you know, there were plenty of people that didn't try it. And I'd have to say, I enjoyed when I did try it. I don't think it was the best D&D there was. I think it's still better than if you really want to play AD&D again, because that's a headache for everything.
Oh, where elf was a class.
That's technically, I think that was 1st edition, and it might have been...
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I'm thinking D&D. AD&D, you had...
And 1st edition, and Thaco. Well, there was technically 1st edition AD&D and 2nd edition AD&D, which I've been talking about 2nd edition AD&D in my videos, but it's hard to really talk about the one before that, because that's out in early 80s, like around the time I was born. Right. So, of course I'm not going to...
late 70s, technically.
No, that was 1st edition.
Mm.
1st edition...
You're right.
The 1st edition of AD&D came out, like, 81 or 82, I think.
Oh, the year I was born, then.
Yeah. And then 2nd edition AD&D came out late 80s, which is the one I'm more familiar with and have most of the books from.
Oh, yeah, Advanced Dungeons & Dragons.
Yes, because there was technically 2 versions of it, like there was 3.0 and 3.5.
Okay.
They did do something that with AD&D. That was a little something that I learned about more recently.
I didn't realize there was 2 different versions of AD&D, so...
But anyway, that comes to one of our first stories for first part of our adventures. Sorry about the little girl in the background, if anybody's hearing her. She's being cute and having her lunch. So that brings us to one of our first, I think the first thing that happened in that adventure that was one of the best moments in that game. So we find this like hole, like we find these like pit traps, and one of them has a tunnel off of it. So you're like, okay, you know what? I'm going to go investigate that. So I'm like, okay, we'll tie a rope to you, you know. We all kind of climb down so we can carry the rope just in case. I think it was just me and Poirier were down there. So it was the warden. So it was River and Chiron were down there. And you're crawling through the tunnel and you get attacked by some creature and it's dragging you off. And so we're losing rope and it's stronger than us combined because we're not great.
Yes.
And so then we're like Gretchen, who didn't join us in the hole for whatever region, was it Gretchen? No, it was Ingrid.
Ingrid, yes.
Ingrid. So we're like, Ingrid, throw us a rope. So we can...
And she literally just throws down a whole rope.
Rather
not tied to anything, not holding it.
So instead of like throwing down a line so we can tie it off so she can also get on the strength, just a pile of rope lies there as me and River like look at each other, look at the rope as the other rope is sliding out of our hands, and we're like, what?
Yeah, not the brainiest person in the group.
Oh, Ingrid, you were wonderful.
Oh.
Yes. That was the really fun part of that first adventure. I think that was a good adventure that we had there. The second one wasn't bad either. Thunderspire Labyrinth, where we went into like some of the Underdark and we had some cool adventures there. and that was ran by Cindy. So Ingrid became a background character for a little bit, and there was, Dwergars and gnolls and a whole bunch of other things that we were fighting against, and really interesting creatures. And I think that's where the problem I found out with everybody but you and Poirier was because no one actually gave me a list of monsters. And I had all the miniatures. And this was a problem with the entire thing, is I had to go through and at least see what the monsters were without reading through anything, which I made sure to do, so I didn't know what was going on in any adventures, really. I had to see what all I had to get together for miniatures and come up with a list of them very quickly. I did this repeatedly. It worked out fine, because also I know I'm good at keeping what I might have learned accidentally away from my character traditionally. I try to do that. Maybe I'm not always successful, but I try to do that when that comes up. So, I don't know. There just seem to have been a few miscommunications here and there and some problems overall, but that was just things.
Yeah.
And I think those were some of the problems with the 4th edition. But then we got to the Pyramid of Shadows, which was horrible.
Oh, God.
Because you
Poirier ran that one, didn't he?
Yes, he did. Poor Poirier, because it was a death trap.
Yeah, he got the worst adventure.
We didn't even know it would have been the worst.
Yeah. Well, no, he happened to get the worst adventure.
Yes. You go into a pyramid. You get stuck in that pyramid. So now you can only rely on the items you find in the pyramid to upgrade yourself. While before, we could at least go shopping at some places and could buy some things. Which, the truth is, 4th edition is a step down from 3rd edition, but not quite down to 5th edition when it comes to magic items, So it's sort of in between. Like 3rd edition, you really needed magic items. 4th edition, you kind of did. 5th edition, you probably can deal without a lot of them, but they're not bad to find.
Yeah. 5th edition, it's not necessary, but it's a bonus.
Yeah. But, so you get in there right away, and you start getting into fights right away. It's really hard to find a place where you're safe, where you can not be, getting murdered by everything. And
actually take a rest.
Yep. And there are constant amounts of traps and deadly things. Yeah. As it's a mega dungeon. It's a single sprawling complex that you're going to play the entire time. And the thing is, yes, we sort of were prepared for it because he warned us we weren't going to be able to spend it, money, but we weren't really prepared for it. And the items that we did find were more based around other classes, all
the items were more class specific, and a lot of us weren't the classes that it was specific to.
I think the rogue stuff was okay for you, but we didn't really have a cleric, we didn't have a fighter, and we didn't have a wizard. Which, granted, the barbarians sort of could take the place of the fighter, sort of. But I was a warlock, so I could sort of do some stuff with the wizard stuff. But and the warden, I think it was either the warden or someone else had some healing abilities, so they sort of could take the cleric stuff. So it kind of worked here and there, but it just wasn't great.
Yeah.
So it's
it was really,
our team wasn't great for it, for one thing.
No, but also that's unfortunately where a GM kind of needs to step in then and go, maybe I need to modify what you're finding to be more specific to the people who are in the...
That's true, but then the problem comes that Poirier was inexperienced. Yes. He had at that point in time had 2 attempts at GMing before, and both of them had failed pretty early on.
Yeah, so, I mean, I'm not saying that Poirier did a bad job. I'm just saying it kind of comes down to that's where a GM does need to be able to expand off of what's written.
Very true, though.
And it can be difficult because, if you don't have a lot of time to prepare, because I don't think he did have a huge amount of time, that...
Yeah.
he was relying more on what was already there, which that's part of what you get a pre-made adventure for, is that you don't have to come up with everything.
Yeah.
And can run it more on the fly. But unfortunately, the group dynamic that we had didn't really lend to what it was written for.
That's true. And we ended on the King of the Troll Haunt warrants, which I think...
Which I didn't finish, I know.
Which I think was a combination of factors for you. First off, you had gotten like busy at that point in time and were running out of time. You didn't have a lot of time to prepare. And I think like very early on, we just did really weird throwing you for a loop stuff that like sort of messed around with the overall... It made that you had to do a lot more work for what the thing is. Like we forced the early encounter with like some of the major enemies. We came up with this ridiculous plan, which technically worked in order to defeat a whole bunch of them. And then we also sort of like accelerated the timetable of the storyline of the entire thing by doing this, which was kind of weird.
Right. Plus, I think also coming off of the
last one,
of the pyramid, that people were kind of in a
mood
on it anymore.
We weren't getting the same consistency from people anyway.
Right.
And I think the pyramid did spoil us to it. But like there were other great moments, I think, like in the pyramid, where I distract a white dragon long enough for, was it you and Poirier, to steal his hoard?
Yes. I do remember that.
Because apparently it doesn't really want to fight because it's just fine where it's at. And I get into a conversation with it, basically devolving down to eventually insulting it repeatedly because I get angry at it because I just hate the thing too much. And I'm getting tired of its arrogance because I'm probably I was really arrogant too. And but the thing is, I keep making my checks or something to like keep it like from getting pissed off or something. So it's hilarious, this entire conversation. While Poirier had this like the magic box that could convert things like from one type of money to another. So you kept throwing in like piles of treasure and he converted it down to like the smallest bits of gold and like throw it in his bag. So it'd be like, thunk, okay, now it's something small. Thunk, now it's something small. Thunk, now it's something small. You'd like shovel in handfuls.
Yes.
It was great. I think you guys eventually got caught, but you got away with so much treasure before you got caught.
Yeah, he did eventually notice us, but by then I think we took like 3/4 of its hoard.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Exit stage left.
I think we did eventually defeat it then, but I liked Chiron. It's like one of those things is like I always think about going back, and even if you didn't want to finish running the Troll King, if like someone else wanted to do it or something, and finishing up that adventure, at least the adventure series.
I know Poirier's talked about it.
Yeah, but someday in the future, maybe. Anyway, all right, so that was our 4th edition game, which again, technically I think we had another one that was a small, like, 1-session experimental. But that's an entirely different story.
Right.
Of ridiculous lewd comments and things like that. And places to hide morning stars that are inappropriate.
Yes.
We can thank Cindy for that comment. Oh, Cindy.
Oh, gosh. But yes, that it was an interesting system, but for me it's something I'm not that interested in getting back to.
I understand.
I like the evolution where 5th edition has gone.
It's definitely understandable. It's again, I did really enjoy the tactical system that existed for 4th edition. But yeah, 3rd edition or 5th edition definitely is fun the way that they've opened it up. I sometimes feel it needs a little bit of that tactical system, but... And there was something that someone mentioned that I had forgotten all about that I thought would have been really cool that they could have done in 5th edition. Minions. I liked minions. The little things that died in one hit. You know, it made you feel a little epic. Granted, I don't think we need as many epic battle scenes in 5th edition, but still.
Right, but no, minions were an interesting thing, and is like, ooh, I killed a whole bunch of things.
Yeah, you could like
kind of made you feel like special.
Yeah, you could like, you know, it's like the Lord of the Rings swathing down like a whole horde of things like before fighting off against like a boss or a more boss type creature, you know.
Right.
That was kind of fun things to do. So
I mean, 4th edition had the fighting aspects of 4th edition were great. It was just for me, like I said, the lack of role playing.
And though it was very balanced, some of the streamlining seemed a little weird too, you know, that everybody had like powers and stuff, you know. It made it interesting that it was better to... You made it more fun to play a generic fighter, but you still... Well, that's like, you know, when Pathfinder did a lot of stuff off of the fighter for 3.5, that made me feel like the fighter was actually something good to play. I guess that's the same thing that 4th edition did, you know.
Right.
Because before the fighter was just, I got feats.
Yeah, you know, it's like, I can kill things well.
I got nothing really special per se, just kill things well. Yep. Alright, why don't we move on to some sage game advice. It does not look like anybody in chat has a question. Let me just check Discussing Tabletop for a question. Because I was struggling with a question for this week. Unless you had one, Joe.
I had not thought of one. No, sorry.
Yeah, I was struggling with a question for this week. Sorry, folks. I could always ask 2 next week to make up for it. Maybe. Just because I was struggling with a decent question to ask for this week. I was coming up with this entire list of the docket on the fly late last night, so... I usually have a couple more days ahead to think of topics and things, and I was trying to open it up just for, in case we got, like, guests that were more related to magic and stuff, some more better topics.
Right.
So, unfortunately, you know, scheduling just didn't allow it. Good discussion topic pertaining to what we... Oh, I got an interesting question to ask that will help people out now that we can discuss it. How about this one?
Okay.
When putting a character in a new system, how well do you read up on the actual system? Do you just get a basic familiarity with it? Do you dive deep into the lore? Or do you do something somewhere in between?
I would say I probably do something in between. I try to get like a decent handle on it. If someone in the group has played the system before, I'll try to say go that route and say, hey, what kind of things to expect, and what's the basis of the system. Try to figure out a lot of the basics, but then go a little deeper into it to also try to figure out, okay, if I'm leaning towards a certain class or race, I'll definitely look deeper into them before deciding, okay, that's what I want.
Yeah. I think for me, I kind of actually had to say I go about this in a very different way, because normally when I'm reading up on a new system, I actually think about how I would run the system, because I am probably a DM/GM/storyteller first almost. That I usually read through a lot of the stuff in a book when I'm going through it. I dive very deep into the rule sets and get some of the world setting things. And I think the rules are more where I hit home the most in character creation. And then I sort of work into that mindset of the world setting. And even then, until I'm actually making a character in it, I don't really throw myself in as much. And usually then I come up with an original story and then figure out how to work it into the setting more. I didn't have to do a lot for any of my Pathfinder characters. I basically came up with a character, then came up with a loose backstory, threw together some locations and stuff, some reasoning behind all the abilities and stuff I took, things like that.
Dad, see you later. Bye.
I think yes, someone very cute's in the background doing stuff. Like I think the most complex story I came up with was my gunslinger character for Giant Slayer when I was playing that.
I'm going to put the
Which,
dog
I
out
mean,
for-
it was an unusual backstory, and there were some holes in it that I never quite filled in because just the way that we were playing the story. But I was effectively the child of a merchant and a native in their version of like the like the Galarian version of the Mwangi Expanse. So like someone from like that area. So I was kind of like the but not like the really darker skinned, more the tan skinned folks from there. So I was kind of like a tan skinned person. I was originally raised by my mom. She passed away. I ended up on the streets. My merchant father came back eventually and refound me, brought me home to his place, which was Coromir, I think I said. Or Coromir's Forgotten Realms. It's the Galarian version of that.
Yeah, that's true.
So I returned with him there. He eventually passed away. He had given up like a title because he was from a noble merchant family. And then I decided just to journey, which I had never finished deciding if I had two reasons that I was thinking about for my journey. I never decided which one would make more sense. The one was just I wanted to find myself before settling down. The other, I thought it might be interesting to come up with like a different type of storyline that maybe I had like a twin sister that went with my father originally. And that was really the reason he came back to get me, you know, was to check on me and stuff, which he occasionally did. And then she had left home before I came back, like ran away from home, and I was going to find her. I mean, that would be a great reason to journey and get into these situations. But again, it's like neither of these was really great, and I never decided which one would be better for my story. But it sounds complex, and it was a little bit, but it wasn't like a ridiculous backstory, which I've done some ridiculous backstories. But you see, I looked up locations and researched it and had it make sense. I found the different. I looked at the Mwangi Expanse. I found the certain areas. I found the areas that's like, oh, this area is heavy on trading. This tribe, which just because I thought I would probably blend in very well with normal people. That it just looks like I have like a tan all the time. That's what I thought my character should do. So I'm like, okay. How would I be able to go about this? Because I know, like, our one character that was from the Mwangi Expanse was very dark-skinned, the one half-elf.
Right.
So I'm like, okay, this area, they tend to be lighter-skinned here. They're still darker-skinned, but tend to be lighter. So I can be, like, effectively like Milano, but on the lighter side.
Right.
It's little things that I came up with like that would make sense. And it built my storyline a little bit. And it was the research that did it. So, I came up with a basic concept, and then I learned gunslinging from my father. Because gunslinging was weird. I mean, I don't know how I'm going to handle it in 5th edition yet. I haven't decided on that. I think
with spelljammer.
I think someone has made 5th edition gunslingers. I'll have to look that up. I'll have to ask, because I know I think there was a gunslinger, or guns at least were involved in one of the online role-playing shows, just because they converted from Pathfinder to 5th edition. I remember hearing about that. So I might be able to find material on it. I might adapt it on my own. I might not use it directly. I might just have them, because they're supposed to be pretty primitive things anyway, and just figure out how to use them. Supposed to be like flintlocks and stuff. So I'll see what I can throw together.
Are we gonna have kablangos?
Can you?
Theoretically, but they won't be called that.
Okay.
I think they're called bombards.
I like kablango better.
Well, gnomes didn't invent them because everybody would have been afraid of them and avoided them. Anything that's called kerblangos, people will avoid like the plague. Because that means they're going to explode. Because gnome.
Hey, leave my race alone.
No. Your race has repeatedly proven dangerous at spelljammer.
Don't know what you're talking about.
Just because explosions rock any area often that they live in.
Hey, explosions rock the Casbah.
Then again, the same happens with the GIF, but Those hippo people that love explosions. And, aren't afraid to die in explosions just to see one.
So a half gnome, half GIF would be rather dangerous.
If they could breed, I don't think they can. I don't
Magic.
Magic can solve everything, but usually it doesn't end up well.
Owlbear.
Yep, it should not be.
Why do I exist?
All right, well, I think that'll probably be it for today. That was an okay question. We at least got a little discussion in there, and a little advice, of how to go about making your character. That if you want to, you can just build it basically in the system. That's fine. But when you're building your character, it's the same as if you're building it from a backstory, starting out with, and then moving into character creation, or moving from character creation and then building a backstory off of that. It's the same when you're knowing of the system. If you're going more on character creation, you probably don't need to know the system, like the setting, as much as you do when you're, let's say, building from a backstory. Then, of course, you need to know the system more. And the amount that you dive into the system and knowing the settings that of it is completely up to you. It's a good idea to be familiar with it, but the amount that you dive into it and know everything... I don't know everything about Forgotten Realms, and I like the system and using it. There's so much literature on Forgotten Realms, so much literature on Galarion even, that I have to look it up. When we're in our pirate game, and we're exploring the shackles,
Yes,
I have to
shackles.
literally, Google the various locations that we're visiting, because they don't mention them anywhere, to be like, what's on this island? What cities are on there? Oh, we have a city. There's a port there we can visit. What would we get there?
Or horrible, horrible death.
Yes, it's like, because, we were like, let's roll on this check. Do we know about it? Yes. Can I Google it? Sure. All right. It's basically what it's ended up being. It's like, because it makes it easier for our game master than to have to open up something else and have his computer open, that I can have my computer or my phone open and doing it, and I can understand that. But, so, it's the amount of knowledge you want, the amount of research you do is up to you entirely, because there is a lot of material for many of these world settings. And it's expansive. Just getting a familiarity with it is probably going to be your best bet, at least, that you're going to want to do, and then maybe making yourself more familiar with whatever areas are associated with your backstory. So,
Agreed.
anyway. So anyway, okay. By Monday, I should be back onto normal schedule. I have to get Bessem out at some point. I'll definitely getting out that today. AD&D and Shadowrun are on the schedule for today. I don't know if I'll both get them out. One of them might have to go on to tomorrow's videos. Sorry if they do. Then tomorrow's videos should be out either on time, or one might have to be pushed to Monday. If one gets pushed to Monday, Discussing Tabletop will be out on... Well, I'll get this video out to supplement if I'm missing something. If I miss Shadowrun today, I'll put out Discussing Tabletop today. I might either put it out then on tomorrow or Monday, just because I'll get this set up and ready for VOD right away. Otherwise, as I said, Treasure Lost Legion, that'll be coming out soon. I will announce on Twitter when that comes out. If you have any kind of questions for Sage Gaming Device, remember to email us at discussingtabletop@yahoo.com, and we will take them into we will answer them. This also works if you have any suggestions for topics you want us to discuss. We will definitely take them. If you want to check out some of the news that's relating to these stories, you can always check out Gathering the Roll every Tuesday. Then I will discuss I will give the basic information, a lot of these news topics that we're going to be talking about. Let's see here. Is there anything else important to mention that you can remember, Joe?
Not that I can think of.
All right, then. So, I guess that we'll be seeing you next week, theoretically around 1 o'clock, the same time. I'll announce on Twitter if we do get either delayed or canceled or anything because of holidays, since it will be Christmas Eve. So if you can join us for Christmas Eve, great. If you can't, you can always check out next week's VOD. As I said, I would probably... I'm not even sure what kind of... I'm going to see if I can get things ahead of time for uploading on Christmas, but I can't guarantee that yet. I might cancel out next week's Sunday videos just because of that. We'll see. or change the schedule around. But, all right.
Okay, have a good week, everyone.
And until next time, I bid you farewell.